What's the strangest thing you've caught people doing in high school? In 8th or 9th grade during gym class we found these two guys under the bleachers playing Yu-Gi-Oh nearly naked. When we asked what the hell they were doing, they said they were playing strip Yu-Gi-Oh. I've never seen a gym coach with such a pure look of disappointment. A bunch of folks at my high school had this obnoxious habit of hiding cream cheese in hard to reach places. Our school cafeteria would serve a breakfast meal every Friday morning, consisting of donuts and bagels. While these provisions were supposed to be for the middle schoolers who were touring the campus, which was kind of an experimental place, funded in part by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, there was almost always enough left over for all of regular students to eat their fill, as well. They would help themselves to whatever edibles they wanted, and a handful of people would make at times ridiculous efforts to abscond with as many single-use containers of cream cheese that they could. Once these heists had happened, the shenanigans would begin. First, the perpetrators would scour the school in search of likely locations for their mischief. After a decent place had been found, they'd open one of their cream cheese containers, squeeze it a little bit on the bottom, and then squish the entire thing against the wall, or the underside of a desk, or wherever. Left unchecked, these breakfast-based barnacles would quickly develop the consistency of concrete, making them nearly impossible to remove without some variety of specialized tool. Although the faculty remain largely unaware of the practice, this game of hiding cream cheese around the school developed into a weird kind of hidden war. One faction would do all that they could to leave their messes where they couldn't be found, while the other faction would attempt to seek out and remove the semi-edible cysts before they could take hold. Nobody kept score, at least, not as far as I ever knew, but there was always a campus-wide opinion about who was winning and who wasn't. For those of us who didn't take part in either activity, although, I confess, I once had fish throughout the school, it was rather like being caught in a bar between two opposing groups of sports fans. That school has grown quite a bit since I attended, both in size and student population. Much of it has been rebuilt, repainted, or otherwise altered in some way. Even so, the last time that I visited, I went and looked at one of the locations where a friend of mine had hidden his cream cheese. I didn't quite know how to feel when I saw that it was still there. I worked at an inner city high school when I lived in Minneapolis. I remember once I had to sub for a choir class for just 1 hour. The teacher got into a car accident. I left the room for 10 minutes, and when I got back, probably 10 kids were smoking out the window and 3 pairs in heated makeout sessions. Somebody had hijacked the overhead projector and lesbian porn was playing for the class, and there was one lone white girl fucking studying. She was strange. A guy in the back of the classroom starts making weird noises, so everyone turns to look at him. It is very obvious the kid is having some serious problems breathing, so the nurse is called. By the time she gets there he's starting to go blue. He's known for liking his drugs, so the nurse is screaming at his friends, "What did he take? You won't get in trouble. Just tell me what he took." But they all just fucking stood there, out of sheer desperation, or maybe just checking to see if his throat was at all open. She just plunges her hand into his mouth, pauses, and yanks something out of his throat. Dude had swallowed a fucking morphine patch. There were 2 big mysteries everyone was trying to solve at my high school. The first was shortly after a science class got iPod minis with cameras. Within the first 2 weeks of us having them, someone had managed to take a dick pic in the middle of class with full lighting, implying they didn't do it under the table. The rest of the week was spent trying to match the dick with its owner. A female version of this happened too. Someone was looking at porn blogs on Twitter when they found a picture of some girl's boobs. What made them interested was that the girl was wearing one of our pair shirts in the picture. Like the above story, the titty mystery, or as I called it, the titstory, lit up Twitter, or you could say tit up Twitter, for the rest of the weekend. Neither culprit was ever found, but I really hope they found each other and started dating. 2 girls in my high school tried to poison another girl by dumping a scoop of copper sulfate into her Slurpee, or slushy, whatever you call it, in the middle of class 2. They thought it would kill her right off the bat, but she took a sip, spit it out and screamed. Everyone saw, everyone knew, and the teacher was pissed. After the police came and all 3 girls left the classroom, he muttered seriously, "A chemistry lab, and they try and use copper sulfate." He sounded disappointed in their choice of chemical. The 2 girls did end up getting charged and expelled. The girl who was the victim left the school shortly after too. When I was in HS, the stoners in my class grew weed in the bushes behind an outdoor prayer and reflection area. Catholic school. There was a hollow saint statue in front of it that looked like it was praying. They popped out a chunk of his foot and would hide any processed or in-use product in the foot of the statue if faculty approached. I was always amazed that they didn't get caught, as the groundskeepers were meticulous about landscaping. Until one day I saw the maintenance guys exchanging goods with the stoners. The stoners had this all figured out. They would give the groundskeepers weed in exchange for them letting the tall plants around the weed go a little unkempt, so the pot plants wouldn't draw attention. They also kept 2 Gamma Boy colors in the statue, so they could play Pokemon. I visited the campus a few weeks ago, over a decade later, and pulled the foot out. Wouldn't you know, the Gamma Boy fired right up, and they had over 120 original Pokemon in their Pokedex. Back in my country, I attended Catholic schools for most of my schooling. I went to an all-boys Catholic school for high school. During my freshman years there was a notorious scat bandit who left his handiwork on the walls. Some students and teachers complained. The custodial staff were royally pissed as well. The principal called up some health officers who educated us about hygiene etc. The whole thing was hilarious. Scat bandit upped the ante and left his stains all over campus. Principal was furious obviously, and a witch hunt was underway. One day, I took a bathroom break during religion class. I was at the urinal, about to do my business, when I hear some giggles and soft singing in the showers. Now the showers haven't been used since the 60s and my curiosity got the better of me. I tiptoed to the singing shower and peeped through the curtains. There was Ned, squatting. A pile of fresh dookie on the side of the shower and his fingers brown with filth. He was inscribing the words "Hello fuckers" on the shower tiles. I froze in horror. He must have heard my breathing and glanced over his shoulder. Our eyes locked for a good 20 seconds. I just couldn't move. He then raised his fingers and did a SHHHH with a wide grin. I walked back slowly, then ran outside and puked profusely. I never told anyone about Ned. He was a troubled kid who had issues. Back then, corporal punishment was enforced, and Ned got a fair share of it. A few months later he transferred out to another school and that was the last I heard of Ned. The cafeteria at my school had this fake plastic kale shit that they lined around the salad bar like it would make the food look appetizing or something. As if these things were like a foot long and green and wiggled around like a dildo. Actually, I've never touched a dildo, so I guess they wiggle around like how I assume a dildo does. Anyway, whenever I went through the line I'd just take one and put it on my tray. It's not like I tried to hide it or anything. The lunch ladies either just didn't notice or didn't care. I ended up taking all of them and nobody noticed. I'd end up leaving them on the desks of my teachers, so each of my teachers would have like 4 or 5 on their desks, or randomly around their class. Eventually the school cop noticed me with one in my hand in the hallway, and he was like, "What the hell?" and made me tell the story, and he was like, "Well, it is technically stealing I guess," and he made me go get them all back to the lunk line. The poor cop didn't know what to do with me, and I ended up walking through the halls carrying armfuls of fake plastic kale and people were like, "Why the hell would this even be a thing?" I'd already pulled a prank much more wide scale earlier in the year though, so most people thought I had been trying to pull another one, and were like, "You go dude." The monster shit. Junior year someone took a shit in one of the men's bathrooms. It must have been at least 5 Corix. But seriously this shit was of such massive proportions that it physically could not be flushed, and was left there almost all day. News of the movement spread quickly, and they actually needed to put an assistant principal outside the bathroom, because kids from all over the school were trying to see it. Eventually they had a janitor shovel it out of the toilet and dispose of it. I feel bad for that janitor. And the anus that produced such a monstrosity. Some kid I knew in high school told me he had been masturbating into a mason jar and saving his cum. He didn't specify why he was saving his cum, but anyway, his pet ferret had somehow gotten into the jar, and by the time he found out, the ferret's face was covered in semen. The thing that stood out to him, and what has painted a picture in my head since, was there was thick pearl necklace connecting the jar to the ferret's nose when he found it. Girl in my class liked to eat paper. You know when you rip a piece of paper out of a notebook and you're left with those scraps around the spiral? That was her favorite. She would also eat tissues. I was a freshman and was into maybe the second quarter of the school year. My English teacher was a pretty straight-edged, sarcastic, and sometimes humorless lady. One day, she announces to us from the front of the classroom that it was her birthday. One of the girls in my class freaks out overjoyed, gets up out of her seat, runs over to the teacher, and essentially starts twerking on her. No one laughed or knew what to do. Just silence as this goes on for a few moments. She eventually stopped. The teacher just told her to get out. The student got suspended for a day or two. It was a bizarre experience. My Latin teacher was this really forgetful old man. Once, when we were in the middle of translating a paragraph, he suddenly left the room, and while he was out, two guys immediately jumped out of their seats. One pulled out a bag of bagels and started thumbtacking them all over the bulletin board, and the other guy turned off all the lights, turned on the TV, and put in the movie 300. When the teacher returned, he saw us all sitting there, earnestly watching 300, looked slightly confused, then sat down at his desk and started grading papers. He didn't notice the bagels until a week later. I've actually got two weird things. Woo. Okay, so the first was when I caught my history teacher selling drugs to students. I forgot a book in his class and didn't notice until lunch, so I doubled back and went into the class. He's sitting at his desk with several bags of weed on his desk and 3 students sitting around him. I just kinda waved, grabbed my book, and got out of there. He was always pretty nice to me after that. The second weird thing I saw in high school was the principal's son beating off in the middle of class. I was a senior, and I was retaking a math class I didn't do so well in the previous year, so I was stuck with sophomores and juniors. So one day, I'm kinda sleeping in class when I hear a familiar sound. The smack 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 of someone spanking the monkey. Then I hear some soft grunts. I look around to see if someone is just making the noise to be funny, and that's when I saw the principal's son going to town on himself. I ended up screaming, "What the fuck?" at the guy, and everyone else did too when they noticed how he was beating his meat, like it owed him money. TL. Doctor caught my teacher dealing drugs, and then caught the principal's son on a date with Pamela Henderson. I was a sophomore in high school at the time, and I was in the library with my last period class. I was sitting at a table by myself. This girl who was a senior came up and sat next to me. She turns to me and says, "Hey, if I show you something, will you promise not to freak out?" I was like, I guess. Because now I was seriously interested / scared about what she was going to show me. She then lifts up her hoodie and had her 4-foot boa constrictor wrapped around her stomach. She was kinda on the bigger side and her hoodie was loose enough so you would have never seen it, and she managed to carry it around all day and never got caught. Literally weirdest experience I've ever had in high school. When I was a senior, I walked into the bathroom and there were 2 freshmen in there, one standing by the sink snickering, and the other one with his pants down and bare ass in the urinal, obviously trying to shit in the urinal. As soon as I walked in and we made eye contact, I kind of just stopped, and they looked at each other very awkwardly, and the kid pulled up his pants and they shuffled out of the bathroom as quick as possible while silently snickering to each other. Mayo, fuck, that was so hilariously awkward. Like, who would really put their bare ass in the urinal and try to shit in it? It is such a weird sight to see a kid bent over looking you in the eyes while he's trying to squeeze shit out of his ass into a urinal. Like, what the fuck? I still crack the fuck up whenever I see that kid. In my high schools, graduating seniors usually spent the week before the exams playing pranks on people. Now most of it was usually harmless fun, like shooting silly string at people, cups full of water on the ground, or lube on the railings. However, one student took it to the extreme. While I was sitting in the atrium eating lunch, yes, private high school kid here, I welcomed the hate. I saw something was right by me. I thought it was nothing, so I kept eating. Suddenly I heard a bunch of girls scream. I turn around, and I shit you not, there's someone running naked with nothing on but a My Little Pony cape. In 9th grade US history I sat behind a Chinese kid that had high grades. During our last exam before the summer break, he couldn't stop moving around in his chair. I saw him constantly crossing and recrossing his legs. He was picking up one foot, putting it on his lap, then dropping it after a few seconds, and redoing the same with the other foot. I thought, this guy's gonna poop his pants and I'll be in the crossfire if he doesn't go to the bathroom sometime soon. A few minutes go by, and I'm stumped by a question on the exam. I'm contemplating on the answer because I have no clue what it is, and staring at the Chinese kid's left ankle that was laying on his right thigh. That's when I noticed this kid's ankle had writing on it. The words running up the medial part of his calf are barely noticeable because of his natural wool leg warmers he has covering his legs. I wait for him to put up his other foot and it also has a cheat sheet written on it. I'll be damned. This guy had me fooled. 5 minutes later the teacher screams, "Time's up. Pass him up." Her voice caught me by surprise and I get spooked. I let out a loud fart and pooped my pants. I went to a military school. Needless to say, a lot of high school kids with substance abuse issues. My sister picks me up one weekend to let me get away from campus for a bit. I come back on a Sunday and start my usual routine of prepping the room for the inspection. I decide to go check on my two friends in another room. I knock on the door and slowly open it. The room appeared gold. Like a weird gold mist. What the fuck? Why is the room golden looking? One of them, who had the most fucked up teeth I had seen in a while, turns and smiles at me. His smile is golden. "You become a rap artist or something?" The other one is nearby, and they both starting laughing uncontrollably. I see the gold spray paint on their desks. They were huffing paint. I walked away. Other weird things. Rumored thought he was a vampire. Drank another guy's blood. Watched the same two eat rotten oranges because they are supposed to make you trip. Same two stole chemicals on the regular from chemistry to huff them.